Hello, and welcome to English lesson number 20 for Mr. Brewer's ACC Junior English class. So we have a lot to get through today. This lesson is actually going to be for Monday, Thursday, and Friday. This is the one lesson for the week of 11:02 to 11:06, the first week of November. We're only doing one lesson this week because this is a bit of a meaty lesson, and I want to have plenty of time to complete the two progress assignments that we have for this week. Normally we'll only do one progress assignment, but one of them is a check-in now that we're finishing up Gatsby, and the other one is the first part of our next essay. We are moving past the This I Believe essays and moving into our next essay starting this week. All right, so there are two assignments due this week, and there's one assignment due next week. So next week, your interview questions and your interview itself will be due on Saturday. So you're going to want to be completing that interview with someone who has either gone to a college and graduated, or someone who has a career that you're interested in by the end of the week next week, and you'll be working on your outlines next week. And then by the end of this week, I would like you to have finished the Gatsby recap and check-in assignment, which is very short and doesn't have a ton to do with the content of Gatsby, but which is more about you telling me what has worked and hasn't worked as we've been reading through Gatsby. And then there is an informational assignment, which is small. You're going to write 6 interview questions and tell me whether you're doing a college or career interview. So 2 assignments due this Saturday, the 7th, and 1 assignment due next Saturday, the 14th. And there will probably be an extra credit opportunity next week along with that outline, but there won't be as many assignments next week. So this is a bit of a busy week, even though we do have Tuesday off. So there are 2 progress assignments this week that will be due on Saturday, and then there's the one larger assignment for mastery, your interview, due next Saturday. All right, so let's get into it a little bit more detail and look at the learning targets. Again, if you take a picture of this QR code, you'll get explanations for every single one of my assignments that I've given so far this year, along with links to all the recorded lessons like the one you're listening to right now. All right, so our learning targets for this week. For writing, we're going to view multiple interview methods and review the outline structure for A2C essay number 2. So this means we can take notes during an interview or on a correspondence, like through email, with someone who's either a college grad or who has a career that you want to pursue, and that will be due next Saturday on the 14th. For literature, we're going to read Chapter 8 in The Great Gatsby, and for work, we're going to check in using the assignment in Google Classroom on how the year's been going, what's been effective or ineffective about my methods in this class. So you're going to give me feedback on the recordings, on the slides. Has that worked? Has that not worked? Is it me? Is it F. Scott Fitzgerald? Is there anything I can do better? Is there anything I could do worse? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Don't tell me how to do worse. But you get the idea. You're going to give me feedback through that assignment. It's not so much about the content of Gatsby as it is about whether or not it's been working for you. And then for the informational assignment, we're going to view examples of interview questions, and we're going to read through an article from the Poynter Institute for Journalistic Integrity. And that means we're going to be able to write interview questions for our interviews after choosing a college or career focus for your second essay. And again, that will be due on Saturday the 7th. So you have 2 assignments due on the 7th. You have the Gatsby recap, which is you kind of telling me what's worked or what hasn't worked. And you have your career or college focus decision along with 6 questions. So you're going to be answering some questions this week about what has or has not been working in this class for you. And you're also going to be writing a couple questions for an interview you'll be doing either this weekend or next week. And that's really the work this week. So let's get into it. Real quick reminder about the week structure. There is usually a lesson on Mondays and Tuesdays and a lesson on Thursdays and Fridays. That's not true this week. There is this lesson for the week because we were focusing on these 2 progress assignments as well as getting in some late essays for This I Believe. And I'm not going to make this week any more complicated than the 2 progress assignments we have. So we're just going to have this one lesson for this week. My office hours are from 10 a.m. to 12:30 on Wednesdays. This week I will have a meeting in the morning, so I'll be in my office from should be 11:30 to 1. So I'll run a little bit later, but it will be a shorter office hour because after that I have clubs. All right, here's a moment of mindfulness. Just this dude and a time frozen New York. I look forward to doing mindfulness in person someday. All right, in class, we'll also be watching the mandatory discrimination and harassment training for students. It's an 8-minute long video that we're not going to watch here, but if you watch it at that link, please do email me and tell me that you have watched it, and I'll add your name to the list of students who have seen it and don't have to watch it again. We'll be watching it this week in class as well to make sure that everyone has completed that. All right, so on to writing. So we're going to be looking at multiple interview methods, and we're going to review the outline structure for the A2C essay number 2. And so this means we're going to be able to take notes during that interview, and we're going to be able to prep our essay and structure an essay so that when we get to the rough draft, peer review, and final draft portion of the essay, it's very easy for us to write because we have a structure to build on. All right, so we're actually going to be starting this essay 2 off with an interview that we're going to use to produce our outline. So let's talk a little bit about what this essay is going to be. So for this assignment, you have a choice of 2 topics. You can choose to explore what it takes to make the transition to college. So that'll be academic expectations of a college course, typical workload, study habits, that sort of thing. Or you can choose to explore a career or a field of study that you're interested in. So that could be the steps you need to take to get to the career, expectations on the job, or potential lifestyles and experiences associated with that career. So this one has kind of 2 guided branches. But this, I believe, essay was very open. This one narrows down a little bit into 2 different paths. You're either talking about college or career. So the purpose of this essay is writing an informative essay where you're going to explore college or a career. The main purpose of this paper is informational, and it is being written for an academic audience. So one of your goals is to make sure that after reading your paper, the reader knows some important things about the college experience or the career that you chose. And you're going to follow the formal writing process to produce a 2-page essay. That sounds like a lot, but because it's double-spaced and because we're going to be doing a lot of pre-work in the outline, interview, rough draft, and feedback phases, by the time you get to the final draft, expanding this into 2 pages won't be such a bear. So if you're going through all 4 of the steps of the writing process, those 2 pages will come more easily than you might expect. So for the process, you're going to conduct your primary research through an interview, because this is a research project. But rather than searching for books and articles, you're going to be gathering information by interviewing a current college student or a graduate, or a person in the field or career that you're interested in. I'm going to give you some tips on how to conduct an interview, as well as how to use the writing process so that makes this a little bit easier. So the requirements for the final draft of this essay, it's going to look like this. It must be 2 pages long, double-spaced. It must be in MLA format, so that's double-space, 1-inch margins, Times New Roman 12-point, and a standard MLA heading and header. And we're going to be adding that heading and header for this essay. Your paper must include an intro paragraph with an explicitly stated thesis. We're going to work on that in our outlines. It must have a 3 or 4 body paragraphs, each having a topic sentence and 3 to 4 supporting details, and a conclusion paragraph. The essay should be written primarily in third-person point of view. So that's kind of third-person omniscient, and we'll be looking at that as well when we're going into our rough draft part of this essay. And you can do some in the first person when you're reflecting on what you've learned from the person you're interviewing. So we're going to talk about how to write like that when we're done with our outlines. So we're going to get our outline done, and then we're going to work on writing like that for the rough draft and the peer review. So don't sweat it. We're going to go over those terms and what they mean for your writing and what they mean for how your essay needs to look. All right, so your completed interview or outline is due next Saturday. And must include that intro that's 4 to 5 sentences long. You're going to be talking about what kind of interview, college or career you're doing, who's being interviewed, and why you chose this person. You're also going to have a thesis statement in there. And you're going to be including 3 support paragraphs minimum. You can add a 4th support paragraph to maybe make it a little bit easier to get to the 2-page mark if you're struggling with that. And in your support paragraphs, you're going to be talking about your questions and the interviewee's answers and some of your thoughts on the discussion. So that will get you to those 4 to 5 sentences pretty quickly. And then for your conclusion, you're going to talk about what you learned about your chosen college or career and how what you've learned has changed or reinforced your own plans for your future. So there is no writing assignment due this week. We're focusing on completing your interviews next week and completing those outlines. The assignments this week are in informational and literature. Yeah, it's basically what I just said. There's 2 progress grades this week. There's small assignments. There's the Gatsby response and recap that's due Saturday, and then there's the interview questions and your choice that's due Saturday. And next week, your interview notes and your outline will be due. All right, so this week's literature learning target is we're going to read Chapter 8 in The Great Gatsby, and rather than respond to questions about Chapter 8, which is pretty straightforward, Gatsby does not make it out of Chapter 8 alive, another character does not make it out of Chapter 8 alive. Spoilers! You shouldn't root for the main characters in our famous literature texts. General rule for the JCPS literature choices: don't root for the main characters. uh, A lot of them die. Okay, so this means we can check in using the assignment in Google Classroom on how the year is going and what's been effective or ineffective about Mr. Brewer's classroom methods for me. So you're going to tell me whether or not these recordings are working for you, whether or not the in-class work has been useful, the space for working with me has been useful. You're going to tell me if the technology has been the main issue or if my format has been the main issue. Basically, you're going to give me some feedback on how I've been running my class, and I'm going to try and use that feedback to shift things going into the winter season. Chapter 8 is up and live, so that is the reading in the slides as well as the YouTube version where I read with you and discuss the blue words and the red words, though I think everything's gold at this point because we're kind of entering the end of the book and it's just beautiful language, and I'm just kind of geeking out with you about how great the writing is. And it's very much like being in the classroom with a nerdy English teacher who's excited to teach a book he loves. Yeah, just a quick recap. As we're reading not just Gatsby, but A Raisin of the Sun soon, blue words and the discussion around blue words are tied to theme, authorial choice, character development, and literary devices. And red words and the discussion around red words are tied to the meaning of that word, the definition, and we're building vocabulary. Yeah, the assignment for Chapter 8 is not directly tied to the reading, but it is a required assignment. You should read read the eighth chapter in Gatsby. It is posted in Google Classroom under primary text, so you can listen on YouTube or read the slides on your own, whichever way works best for you. Yeah, and the progress assignment this week is a check-in. So this is what the assignment says. It says, hello, we're coming up on the final chapter in The Great Gatsby, and I'd like to take a minute to get your feedback on the text, the method of presentation, and where you're at in the course. This is an opinion assignment. The only wrong answer is no answer, and I'd like to hear about how things are going, or what I can do better for our next text, A Raisin in the Sun, during November and December. Please answer the following questions with as much detail as possible. And thank you again for your time and effort. So like straight up, like this helps me a lot in trying to help you and make the course more meaningful and not a waste of your time. I'd love for you to answer all the questions, but for the sake of your time, you're going to get full credit if you answer a minimum of 5 of these questions. Please don't answer just the first 5 to get it done. Please read through and find 5 questions you have a strong opinion on, because I'd much rather be able to help you personally than just get, a one and done. Now, if you just like knock it out, do 5, then you're done. That's all right. You'll still get full credit. But if you look through it and you find it a question that you really want to give me feedback on, that you'd really like something to change, or you think something is really effective, that helps me more than just answering the first 5 and being done. But you can. But I'd love more feedback than that, more specific feedback. This is what it looks like in Google Classroom. It's titled Graded Gatsby Recap and Reflection. And it is up and it is live. That is the first of the 2 small graded assignments. The second one is informational, and it's the interview questions. And we're going to go through how to do that now. So for our informational portion today, we're going to look at some examples of interview questions and an article from the Poynter Institute for Journalistic Integrity. So this means we can write interview questions for our own interview and choose a college or career focus, and that will be due on Saturday as well. So the Poynter Institute for Journalism runs the PolitiFact Fact Checker, which is a fact-checking website that checks other news articles, facts, and they have an Institute for Journalistic Integrity, which just means that they're kind of dedicated to trying to cut through fake news and all that jazz and get to the heart of real solid truth in the world. And they have this really dope building that I like that. Some nice architecture. All right. So we're going to look at the 12 basics of interviewing, listening, and note-taking before we go into your interview that you're going to be doing. So this is the article from the Poynter Institute. They say, as a writer, I would not give myself high marks for the crafts of interviewing, listening, and note-taking, but I have sat at the knees of journalists who are experts in these elements of craft. John Sawatsky of ESPN, Jacques Bonasinski from the University of Missouri, and Tom French of Indiana University, all of whom have taught at Poynter. Not long ago, I taught a workshop on these topics to the young men of Poynter's Write Field program. About 40 minority students attending middle school and high school. They found my lessons useful, so I thought I would pass them on to a larger audience. I realize these dozen strategies constitute the basics, but I am struggling with a craft, golf, music, writing. I find it helpful to remind myself of those basics, to climb down from the penthouse and visit the ground floor. All right, so this is fundamentals. And if you are in any sport, you know that the fundamentals are the most important thing because you can't do anything without the fundamentals. All right, let's look at a couple different steps to making a really strong interview. So first off, even if you have a chance to record it, you should be backing it up in a notebook because you don't know if your audio recording will work or run the entire time. So you should be taking notes of some kind on paper or typed. And the second thing you should do is be prepared. So before you interview someone, if it's someone you know or if it's someone that you contact in a job, Google them. Find out a little about them before you actually are in the interview. And that'll help the interview flow more naturally because you're going to know a little bit about them already and you'll have specific questions to ask. And the third thing is something that we're going to work on in class this week is you're going to be creating a list of questions that you want to ask them. So you might want to save tough questions for the end because by then you've kind of built a rapport or a relationship with them. If it's someone you know really closely, you can kind of lead with those, but it's generally a good idea to kind of save your bigger questions or your bigger asks for the end of your interviews. So something else that you should do is try not to be tied to your list of questions. This is especially true if you're doing a live interview on the phone or in person. So just listen to the other person talk and let them know you're listening by maintaining eye contact, nodding your head, leaning forward, taking notes. Give them some like, yeah. Give them some of those feedback sounds that make people know that they're being heard. And try to add branching questions. What that is whenever someone kind of discusses a topic that is interesting and still tied to what you're interviewing them about, you can ask them to talk more about that, and it can produce these really deep interviews. Another important thing to do is to write down keywords and phrases that are going to be useful when you're writing your paper. So if you're interviewing someone about a career in, let's say, architecture around Louisville, and they're a house designer, and they say something about the hardest part for them was learning how to incorporate electrical systems into their designs and planning for electrical, you might write down electrical equals difficult and remind yourself that you want to go back to that part in the interview or use that question and answer in your essay itself because it's an interesting piece of information. And if the number 6 really only applies to in person, so if they're talking too fast, don't be afraid to say, hey, can I have a second to write that down? Or 1 second, that sounds important. Can you please say it again? It's just so that you can make sure you're quoting them correctly and that you can correctly incorporate their words into what you're writing. Another important thing is as soon as you can after your interview, take a look at your notes. You don't need to fill them out from memory, but if you can type them out, that'd be a good idea so that you can then just copy and paste your typed notes into your essay as part of your essay. The more notes you take during your interview, the less you will have to write in your essay. Writing down exactly what the other person is saying will be quoted. Writing down your thoughts on what they're saying might go directly into your essay as your thoughts on what they're saying. So the more you can write during the interview part of this process, just like when we were doing our outline before, the more you can write in the first couple parts of this essay, the less you'll need to make new stuff for your rough draft and your final draft. 8 is super important. You should annotate your notes. That's mark them with stars or arrows or marginalia, which is just a dope word for writing in the margins. That's a good quote for the end of the story. So what that looks like is there's an example over here. This person has written, interesting, the word interesting. Should I just they wrote that this stuff here is interesting. And then they explained why it was interesting underneath in the margins. That's really good because then when you go to write your rough draft, you know what you found interesting or, interesting or important. Like this thing over here in the purple that they underlined is all interesting. This thing over here is important. They thought that this was a new information. Just that kind of annotation is going to save you time when you're doing your rough draft. The more you can write out your thoughts in response to the interview, during the interview and after the interview on your outline, the easier that rough draft is going to be. I really can't emphasize that enough. Rough drafts are hard to write if you don't have outlines, if you don't have notes, if you don't have annotations. If you have an outline and notes and annotations, you've already done most of the thinking you have to do when writing a rough draft. Sitting down in front of a blank page to write a rough draft is terrifying and horrible and a terrible experience that no one should have to go through. It's awful. I too suffer from writer's block. The best way through writer's block when you're working on an essay like this, though, is to have structured preparation, and that's what the outline's for. The next one is for in-person interviews, and just a good note. Don't write down what you just hear, just what you hear, but also what you see. So what does a person look like? What are they doing with their hands? Do they look defensive? Do they look interested? Do they look tired? How they look might go into your final draft. It might not, but it's good to have because it will help remind you of what it was like to be in that interview. All right, the next one, be polite and respectful. You don't necessarily have to bow, but if you're, this is from the WikiHow on how to be polite in Thailand. So if you're interviewing someone from Thailand, definitely bow. Especially even to subjects who are grumpy or difficult, be polite. Arrive early to check out the scene, stay late to gather final thoughts. That's kind of an in-person one. Don't arrive so early that there are dinosaurs because you use a time machine like Phineas and Ferb, but you get the idea. And call back the source to gather anything you missed or to check the accuracy of something if you're not sure of it. So if you aren't sure that you're correctly quoting someone, don't hesitate to reach out to them so you know that you're quoting them correctly and you don't misquote someone. That's not such a big deal in this essay, but misquoting in journalism, or if you're in a journalism class or club, misquoting can be really bad for you because it could potentially become something called libel, which is illegal, which is where you put words in someone's mouth and then print them that are not true. So it's important to make sure that you got your quotes correctly before you publish. In this case, it's not such a big deal, but it's a good habit to be in. All right, so 3 quick bonus tips. Just ask one question at a time. No multi-part questions. Be specific and be succinct in your question asking. Succinct just means short. And another one is asking open-ended questions, not ones that can be answered with yes or no. Some examples of those are on the right, like how does that make you feel? Could you give me an example? Can you describe that? How or why questions? Tell me more. Just trying to draw out more robust answers from the person you're interviewing than yes or no answers. And then be patient. Don't break the silence with a new question. In education, it's called wait time. In journalism, it's called wait time. So just hang out after you ask a question, if you're doing it live or if you're recording it, and let them be quiet while they think. Sometimes people really got to think about questions like, what got you into your career? That's a lot of their life that they're trying to figure out and determine what part of it really drew them into their career. All right, so the small assignment for this week in Informational is a 2-part assignment. You're going to choose either college or career focus for this essay. If you choose a college focus, you're going to be interviewing them about the process of getting into a college, their experience completing it, maybe the cost of their degree, how they're paying or paid for it, and the impact of their degree on their career options. If you choose to interview someone for a career that you're interested in, you might ask things like, what's their workday like? How they got the job? Was it an internship, a degree? Did they know someone? Was it a family business? You might ask about their starting salary, which is important to you because it determines the sort of housing you can afford if you start in that job. And then why they enjoy the work or what's difficult about it, that kind of question. So the interview assignment is formatted like this. You're going to choose which type of interview. You're going to tell me college or career, and then you're going to write one of each of these 6 types of questions. So you will write a question asking them about behaviors. You'll write a question asking them about opinions or values. You'll write a question asking them about their feelings. You'll write a question asking them about knowledge that has to do with their college or career choices. You'll ask them a sensory question, which feels a little bit out of place in an informational essay until you think about, was the dorm room hot? Was it stuffy? Were the dorms really nice? What was it like to live in a dorm with other people? What did that smell or sound like? What does it smell or sound like on the job where you work? Are you tired? Are you physically tired at the end of the day? That kind of sensory information can make this sort of essay more interesting than just dry information, getting some of the senses involved. And then the background or demographics, how old were they when they went into college? How old were they when they got their career? What kind of education did they need for their career? That sort of thing. And in Google Classroom, the assignment looks like this. It's titled Graded Interview Questions and College or Career Choices. So that is the assignment for November 7th, this Saturday. And once again, real quick, there are only those 2 small graded assignments this week. The Gatsby recap, which is your feelings on how things have gone so far, and you giving me feedback on what has been working or not working in the class. You need to answer 5 of those questions for full credit. And your interview questions, which are also due this Saturday, and your decision. So you'll tell me whether it's a college or a career interview, and then you will write 6 questions that you'll be asking during your interview next week. And next week, you'll be working on those interviews and your outline for this next essay number 2. All right, and that is the work for this week. Your interview and outline will be due next week. Your Gatsby recap and feedback is due at the end of this week. And your questions for interview are due at the end of this week also. 2 assignments due this Saturday, and 1 larger assignment due next Saturday. Thank you so much for listening through as I explained the assignments for the week of November the 2nd. I hope you guys have a good week. I hope our country has a good week. I hope everything runs as smoothly as it can. And thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you guys in class. Have a good one. Bye.